What makes you the right person to serve on the Board of Finance?
Well, actually, I'm working on my editorial to kind of answer that very question. Um, and I think we've been very fortunate to have some very talented people on the board of finance that have done an excellent job, quite frankly, in the past. But it seems to me there's been a plethora of finance people, which is a good thing that, CPAs and chief financial officers, and don't get me wrong, we've been lucky to have this talent. So don't get me wrong. I think Matt's doing a good job. But what I think I bring is my background is more data analytics. So you want to think Moneyball. I think I will bring more of looking for those nuggets of gold. So am I thinking of not looking back necessarily one budget or two budgets, but looking back 12 budgets, trying to coax out the nuggets of gold that might lead to some savings. Um, Having said that, in data analytics, we kind of say first you have data leads to information to knowledge, and knowledge to wisdom. So I'm hoping by taking maybe a longer view and bringing that sort of expertise, the type of stuff I do 8 hours a day at my job, I'm hoping to bring that type of information and insight into the budgeting process.
Is your job in data involved with the financial world at all?
Right now, I has in the past. I've had clients like Merrill Lynch and Citibank in my past. Right now, I do mainly sales analytics, but as part of that effort, we do look at revenue retention and uh, some of those finance numbers. So I would say not right now, but like I said, my background is data analytics, and I think we can apply those tools to the budgeting process.
Given the perspective you come from, what's your take on Wilton's financial state right now?
The state itself is good. I mean, we should be very proud of our AAA rating, and I would like to maintain that. I was probably as shocked at the CFO issue coming up when it did. I mean, obviously, people like the controller or the town planner leave when they leave, but to get that triple whammy all at once um, makes me wonder about what kind of oversight was being done with, especially with the CFO. I mean, how does she have two jobs at once? I really don't want to point fingers anywhere. But obviously we need to think about how we are going to manage our professional staff and who's in charge of that. I thought it was a good idea when Lynn Vanderslice instituted a town manager a couple of years back. I think managing that large a budget is a skill you should train for and not necessarily rely on, say, the elected first selectman, which may be lacking in that. I actually see this first selectman role moving forward as more kind of a salesman and cheerleader for Wilton, bringing the type of new industry and new housing projects to town that would make us grow and make be a better town, improve our financial footing. So, um, I guess that's about where I fall on that issue.
How have we been doing then? Based on what
Uh,
the things you think the town should be, how have we been doing?
Good on the financial side, terrible on the marketing side. Um, I think you might have a quote from me in the paper from a few months ago where people were complaining about the type of projects being approved by planning and zoning, which I'm a member for the last 8 years. And my comment was, we can only work with the projects being brought before us, and it's not necessarily our job to figure out what project can come to town. That's kind of like the Economic Development Commission. That's the people who are in charge of selling the town. For lack of a better person, that's really the first selectman's job to sell our town.
So you said financial, you said marketing. What about management in terms of the state of our town? Because that figured you mentioned the town
Yeah.
administrator. What do you
Well,
think?
like I said, the finances seem to be, from what I've studied, looking at the budget, we're not in terrible shape. We're not in great shape. We have this monumental mountain of projects. I mean, quite frankly, when I go to town hall, it's an embarrassment to our town that we present as our city hall. Um, so while they've done a good job maintaining our AAA rating, maybe we're not spending on the maintenance projects we should be. I'm concerned things like there's a selectmen's budget, which is about a third of the budget, that they lump, say, ongoing maintenance with the other line items. So I would separate, say, a short-term capital maintenance budget from the rest of the budget moving forward if I could. And the reason this came up to me was I was disgusted that they bonded a snowplow this year. It was $300,000. I mean, I know that's a lot of money, but $300,000. But we do it every year. And until now, we've always bought that snowplow. There's 15 snowplows. We retire one, we buy a new one. Seemed like something we need to do. Now, I understand that's a capital expense. You could argue that future people who receive the benefit from it should pay for it. But quite frankly, we're paying 30 or 40% now in interest on those bonds over the life of the bond, compounded. And that's $300,000 or $400,000 we can't bond for our school renovation or our city hall renovation. So I think certain small capital budgets should be paid for in that year. The roads might fall into that. When I was asked, I think it was Lynn at the time, well, why are we bonding roads if every year we're going to do $1 million of road repavement? And her answer was, well, this way, if we bond it, we have the discipline to make sure we do the actual paving. And so we're going to incur a lot of interest payments, reduce by probably 10 or $15 million our ability to borrow at AAA rating because we don't have the discipline to say, okay, we need to do X number of miles every year on the roads.
Did you remember learning about the fact that there was $1 million sitting in the DPW account for road paving that had been bonded that hadn't been spent or wasn't going to be spent, and then they added another $700,000?
No, I wasn't aware of that.
And that's part of, I think, some of the deep issues going on with finance at town hall.
The Board of Finance's job is to make sure the resources are available to do what the town needs to maintain our AAA credit rating, to make sure we're a well-functioning town. I don't know if 5 volunteers can ensure that when they allocate the money, that the money is then spent.
Who's responsible then?
I would put that in the selectman's office, or actually the town manager rolling up to the selectman's office. And I don't want to throw stones, but I was a little surprised when I found out that our town manager was the elected official as first selectman of another town. I didn't know what his credentials were beyond that. I think running a town with $125 million budget is a specific skill. If I was running a company that had revenues of $125 million, I'd be probably making more than 200 grand a year. I'd probably have an MBA from an accredited business school. And there are public administration as well as just business administration that people learn how to run towns. I think we're sophisticated enough that we should have that.
So we're looking at having a first selectman, town administrator, and a CFO. Now, you're saying right here that the question comes up, has the town administrator been effective in their role in overseeing? And that's a pretty high salary. We're talking about 3 very high salaries.
Yes.
At what point, maybe, I don't know if it's in the purview of the Board of Finance, but at what point Do you sort of say, do we really need all three positions? Do we need to rework how the town is organized?
That may be a good question. And with Board of Ed getting their own, the last CFO did both the whole town, Board of Ed and everyone. Maybe it makes more sense. We have a Board of Ed CFO. I mean that's 2/3 of the budget, right? And now that you only use 1/3 of the budget, maybe this is a CFO / town administrator. So you're down to 2 people. We had 3 high-priced people before. Maybe that makes sense. But I also think that's a Board of Selectmen issue more than a Board of Finance issue.
Do you think
So-
that the Board of Finance should have more of a voice in that kind of thing? Like ask to have the Board of Selectmen and the CFO come in together to give a report and give feedback? I mean, we've seen that recently because there have been issues in the finance department, but should there be more of that?
I don't think that's been a reasonable request. You don't want to get too many, cooks in the broth, as they say. But at the same time, certainly the CFO should have a dotted line responsibility to the Board of Finance and has to work closely with the Board of Finance for the CFO to be effective, for Board of Finance to be effective. So if you're looking at, say, a combined town manager / CFO, they should be at most, if not all, but most the BOF meetings.
I do just want to make a clarification about town manager versus town administrator. They actually, I think statutorily, they are different. And we have a town administrator, not a manager. And that's a charter thing. So I just want to make sure that that's clear and in terms of what you're saying and when you're saying it.
Yeah. So town maybe again, charter revision. We're always seems we do that every 5 to 10 years. We have a revised charter. Probably we should up at that point also increase the minimum bonding amount, because my guess is when 300K was or 250K was originally approved for bonding levels, that you could buy a snowplow for less than that.
Does there come a point where you start getting concerned about things like the Moody's rating because of what we're looking at in terms of the finance department and management throughout?
Yes. I mean, we save millions of dollars by having our AAA rating. Obviously it was so critical. What was it, 2 years ago, or was it 1 year ago, when we really had a hefty increase in our mill rate, and part of it was the bonding agency wanted us to increase our capital reserve.
Right.
And people, I was actually surprised how easily that budget went through the vote. But it was explained to people that we need to do this because this will save us money in the long run, and people accepted it. I think if the Board of Finance, I think, has been pretty good about being open with the public in the past. And I hope to continue that.
Well, given what's been going on in the last year, do you think that the town needs to be worried about the Moody's rating this coming year?
I don't know enough about how Moody's operates. That'd probably be more of a CFO, someone with more of a finance background probably can answer that question better than I did. I think I said early in the interview that I think my tour de force for being on board BOF was my data analytics skills that I can bring to it. I certainly wouldn't want 5 of me on the Board of Finance, but one of me I think makes a nice balancing act.
All right. Let's talk a little bit about the Board of Finance and the Board of Selectmen Process Review Committee that's been formed. What is your understanding of the Process Review Committee's role, and how are you going to make sure that its work is going to help, prevent any kind of future financial missteps or sloppy governance that I think that term had actually been used this year?
Well, I was actually a little disappointed that Tony appointed herself. And not to say she's not an honest broker, but I would like to review my work performance also. Again, not to say she's not doing a good job or a bad job, but it just seems to me a conflict of interest there. I think we would have been better served if other selectmen had been appointed to that process, and maybe even some people who are not currently in who've not in government who have served in the past. Richard Walker comes to mind, who served our town for many years. Um, John Calamarides might be a good addition to something like that. Again, not on any particular board right now, but has worked very diligently for the betterment of Wilton. It's a good idea to have the joint committee to look at these issues and maybe come up with new policies and procedures to avoid some of the trouble spots moving forward. But I don't think we're well served necessarily by, say, having the same players in place. If that's a fair statement.
As part of the budgeting process, you need to get accurate numbers. You're a data guy, you need accurate numbers.
Like I said, data, knowledge, data, information, knowledge, wisdom.
Yeah. So with so many of the key finance positions vacant, how would you make sure that the finance department is going to be able to get you reliable numbers?
I don't, well, I don't really know. Hopefully quickly we'll have a new CFO in place. They'll be able to rebuild the department. I mean, to lose both the CFO and the controller at the same time, is devastating, obviously. I I'm sure most of those numbers are in the computer and just need to be gotten out. So when you get the new person in place, but I think it starts with hiring a new CFO, which has to happen yesterday.
I don't even know if all the numbers are in place based on last year's budget process, because the Board of Finance was presented with different numbers at different points.
Yeah, something fell down along the way. I don't know, Board of Finance, while we theoretically control the purse strings, we don't. And what I mean by that is, like, the Board of Ed budget can actually still go forward in the town meeting with the statement, Board of Finance did not approve this. But if Board of Finance doesn't approve, say, the Board of Ed budget, and it's voted on and the voters vote for it, it goes forward. So how much, so while we like to say we have control and everything's in negotiation, and we have to work with both selectmen and the Board of Ed, is as much a control process negotiation as it is a dictate from the Board of Finance.
Yeah, I'm an outside observer.
Okay.
So I had no idea of the situation with Dawn Norton that was going to come up.
Neither did I.
On Zoom meetings, was there some safeguard? This is something the Board of Finance should have been aware of. How could they have done something to maybe intervene, or is it even appropriate to intervene? Was there any?
I don't know. I mean, what how do you start off the meeting? Well, Dawn's in Wyoming because she was getting special permission to work from home while her husband recuperates, right? That was the story we're kind of told. So does Matt sit there every meeting? Hey, Dawn, did you take another job? You want to tell us about? I mean, it's a bizarre question to ask. So, and she claimed she had permission from us to do that. Well, who could give her permission? Tony? Look, I was very upset about lately your article on the DPW spending $50,000 without Board of Selectmen approval. And you did a great job on that article, but how do you say, well, we got to sign this right away to get this deal at the same time it's a week old? It seems that lays at the door of the first selectman's office directly. And it seems like sometimes Tony acts unilaterally at times, from what I can see, from what I read in your newspaper.
So is there a role for the Board of Finance members individually or during a meeting? I mean, do you think that the Board of Finance should be more vocal or outspoken about what they see or what they read in Good Morning Wilton that's happening?
You know, I don't know the answer to that question. Um, but like the Board of Finance's job isn't really day-to-day management of the town. It's to put together the budget for the year. So it seems those are two very different buckets. Um, you know, we should only step forward, I think, if we're not getting the information we need to do our job as a board.
The Wilton Capital Planning Committee
Yeah.
is the second iteration of TSNAP. They've got a very specific role in trying to follow up on the $150 million panoply of projects facing the town. Are they working effectively? There was concerns about the first iteration of the committee. What's your take on how they're doing now?
I have not been studying the minutes well enough to give an informed opinion there. I would love to, I really need to study where the 150 million number came from. It just seems like a huge, I mean, I understand, but we just did Miller Driscoll. It seems like we're always upgrading the high school. I know Cider Mill needs to really, Cider Mill and Millbrook, it's been a long time since we've touched those buildings. And of course, the town hall complex is an absolute disaster. It's as I think I mentioned earlier in the resume, it is an embarrassment to our town.
Are you saying the 150 million sounds like too little or too much?
It's it's without digging into the numbers, I really can't say intelligently whether it's too little, but it sounds like too much. It seems to me for a $30 million, you should be able to rebuild the whole complex. Um, you know, um, we no one's talking about doing to either school what we did to Miller Driscoll, which was really a complete tear down. I don't think people appreciate that it's really a new building there. And they did it for $40 million. Now I know it's now what 12 years later, 13 years later. No, not even 9 years later, I think, since we did Miller Driscoll. So I mean, I understand that there's some major projects to do, especially Millbrook. Millbrook looks disgusting. The town hall looks disgusting. But at the same time, I would like to see where they came with $150 million. I need to dig into that more.
Talking about renovations and everything, there have been, a lot of discussions this past year about the upkeep of some of Wilton's historic properties. Whether you're talking Ambler Farm, Gilbert and Bennett, in Town Hall. Where are you on the weighing renovation versus tear down, and making sure the town keeps the focus on that kind of fiscal responsibility?
Well, I don't want to sound like a spendthrift, but you got to take that in context too. Renovate. Sometimes it'll cost you more to renovate, but if it's the Ambler Farm property, you're going to tear down the antique farmhouse. So there may be an historic preservation bit to it. Same thing with the Gilbert property in Georgetown. So do we want to, necessarily tear down that beautiful building? So you got to look at, and what are we using that building for? I think mainly we've leased it out the last few years when we can. Different schools, different summer camps have used that property. So we have to look at those issues. I think there's a place for historic, and quite frankly, maybe something we should spend a little extra money to maintain the historic nature of the town. But at the same point, we have to be smart about it. I would hate to lose our town hall with the brick and the pillar column, but might it be cheaper to tear that building down, build something better, and still maybe have the New England look. Because that building really is in terrible shape. I mean,
Speaking of Ambler Farm, do you think the Board of Finance handled its concerns about the Ambler Farm lease appropriately? And has it impacted the relationship between the town and Friends of Ambler Farm?
yeah, I think they did. If people get mad at them for protecting the town's financial interests, I don't want to say they need a thicker skin, but we all have our parts to play, you might say. Um, and they let go forward to a vote. So they said, look, we think this is our opinion on it. The town should vote on it. And these are and people had their say. So I thought that worked out very well. I think at that town meeting, I would have been a little happier if they explained why they didn't endorse that, which I don't think they did sufficiently enough. I don't think they were as open as they could have been. But you know, it was interesting because I can't remember any other bonding issue where it went forward to the town vote without the endorsement of the Board of Finance. So it was a little interesting.
Well, there's now, I mean, it kind of continues on. I don't know how much you've been following about the overall lease and how critical the Board of Finance has been on that lease. And it's created a great deal of tension and conflict between Friends of Ambler Farm, the Board of Finance, the Board of Selectmen. It's been a lot. What do you think about how that's been handled and how it's impacted the relationship between Ambler Farm and the town?
Um, I, I think I'm going to pass on that. I I haven't been in the nitty gritty enough to really answer there, so I'm going to pass on that question and hopefully do a little better research for the League of Women Voters meeting on the 15th or 16th.
Since we're on projects, the police headquarters, Middlebrook renovations have had delays, overruns, a lot of issues.
You know,
DPW finance. What's the Board of Finance's role in keeping them on track?
again, I don't think they have the staff or the bandwidth for that. That's where a good town manager comes into play, or town administrator. I remember when we were doing Miller Driscoll, and somebody actually said to me, what's with this Turner Construction? Who are they bribing that they get every contract in town? And they didn't get the police station, mind you. And I looked at them. I said, they only bring in the projects earlier on time and under budget. That's their trick. And they do $1 billion a year in school construction. I don't think our few $1 million turns their head that much. So I don't know how this contractor was picked for the police station. I know when I do projects around my house and I have to get quotes, I always seem to get 5 or 6 quotes if I can. Inevitably, the cheapest quote is less than half the price of the most expensive quote. And I usually end up picking somebody in the middle. I mean, I don't know how the contractor was picked for the police station, but one I'm reading stories that he won't hold daily meetings to work among the subcontractors. Red flags go up in my mind. And when I hear that they didn't budget furniture in the $19 million, I'm thinking to myself, who's running this? But again, I think there's a town manager first selectman issue, not a Board of Finance issue. And we don't have the staff or the bandwidth for that. Board of Finance are just volunteers, and they give a lot of time every month just to get the budget done.
So speaking of budgets and something that the Board of Finance absolutely does have a role in, it's setting budget guidance. And that discussion has already started. If you were part of the discussion today about budget guidance, what would you suggest that the board set as guidance?
Oh, Um, there's so many factors there. I I can't give that number. I mean, you'd have to look at the, you know, again, this is where my data analytics comes to mind. We have to look at the inflation rate. Well, are we locking in the price of heating oil for the building so we can fix that number? And is that number higher than it was last year? Um, we have to look at what's happening with the salaries. So, if the salaries are because there's a 3 or 4% bump in salary because of steps on the teachers, that's already built into it. Um, what's happening with the other major line items in the thing? What's our reserve for unexpected things because there was more snowstorms than we expected. So again, this is where I think my data analytics skills could maybe give insight into setting that guidance number.
Do you think that the Board of Finance in the past several years has done a good job at setting guidance, that they've been accurate, that they've done, they've done well by the town and residents?
For the most part, yes. I mean, most years it seems like we're under inflation. Of course, we had that hit 2 years ago where you had you had three things I think happening: the reevaluation, the Moody's thing, and there was a third thing affecting the mill rate 2 years ago. What was the third thing? Oh, I can't remember. But I remember there was three things, and all of a sudden we get hit with it. Well, the reevaluation obviously shifted responsibility from commercial to residential for the second reevaluation in a row. So that was tough on our part. So, and again, 2 years. I was shocked that the budget did pass as easily as it did.
We've learned that the town has $2.6 million in unpaid taxes. And they brought up, the idea of a tax sale. What do you think about that?
Oh, I hate that idea. I hate it because you're talking about only recouping 1.5 million. Basically, we will get that money. Eventually, those properties will change hands. We will get that money. I know when I first moved to town, my neighbor was in their late 70s, early 80s on a fixed income. They couldn't quite keep up with the property tax, even though they had the 5% senior citizen discount. I don't think anyone wanted to evict them because they couldn't pay at the time their $10,000 property tax bill. I think we are a community. As a community, we sometimes need to take care of the weak. Now, quite frankly, when they went to sell the house, which they got $1 million for, the town got their property tax money. So, and if it's a commercial property, we can put a lien on the property. We can have our lawyers go to court, garnish things. But to give up a million in a tax sale because we want that money now, I don't think they have to convince me better that this is the wise move.
How long should the town give people a chance, though?
It depends on the situation. Like I said, if it's an elderly couple, which quite frankly will probably be selling the house in the next 10 years, we will recoup our money with interest. So again, we, we're a community and we have to think in terms of the community. If it's this ASML shirking I don't mean to single them out. I know they're wonderful corporate citizens. They do a lot for our town. That was a bad example, but let's say it's one of the new apartment buildings. We should be a little more aggressive and get our money as opposed to say an elderly couple who probably the next 5 to 10 years will be selling their house anyway because they'll be downsizing or God forbid something worse. And we'll get our money. I think any town that collects 100% of their property taxes every year is probably a pretty heartless town.
Speaking of legalities, the Board of Finance had looked into close to a year ago retaining its own counsel, or what would happen, or how they could possibly retain their own counsel after a couple of issues had come up. When you look at what happened with the Ambler Farm lease, the town's legal counsel is another example of seeing things very differently from the way the Board of Finance was seeing things. Do you think that the Board of Finance should have its own legal advice?
What we're really saying is we have a group of people who don't trust who the Board of Selectmen hired to do that job. And that's problematic at the very get-go. I believe Tony brought in a new town council when she became first selectman. Am I misremembering that?
Mm-mm.
No, okay.
Yeah, no, it's the
Okay.
same firms, sometimes
Ira
different.
Bloom.
Yeah, he's overall town council, but there are sometimes different attorneys, a
Yeah.
different attorney who shows up more.
Generally, when we've had town council for P and Z, or even years earlier for ZBA, with Ira. I like them. I guess the question, the town council obviously should be serving the town and not necessarily any particular board. And if a group of if one commission or excuse me, board doesn't like his advice, I would love to know more about that before I would even want to comment directly on it. So
What's your assessment of the current Board of Finance, and what would you do differently or the same if you were elected?
I think they are doing a good job. I've seen Matt in action. He's pretty thorough. And I really think he plays it down the middle. Um, I think, as I stated earlier, what I think I can bring to the process is my data analytics skills to kind of crunch the numbers differently than maybe a finance person would. I think that's what I might do differently. And hopefully see that insight. So, I mean, I assume they've done the big things, like health insurance, but even that data analytics, if it can yield a 1 or 2% savings, that could be what, $2 million, which is by the way the amount of the tax sale.
Give voters your 30-second elevator pitch for why you deserve their vote.
I think I deserve their vote, because I can bring a data analytics eye to the job that I think has been missing up until now. That's not to say the people there aren't doing a good job, but I think I bring a different skill set than is currently on the Board of Finance.
Okay. Eric, thank you very much.